Welcome. I'm Bob Fox, principal at Fox Architects, and I publish Work Design magazine. And today I'm having a conversation with Frederico Negro, and we're talking about the next work environment competition. Frederico, welcome. It's great to have you participate in the competition.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. It's good to be here.
The competition's seeking to find and recognize the best talent for innovation and high-performing work environments. You're doing some exciting work. Can you share, with us, your role, your firm, and the types of things that you're working on?
Sure. So our company is called Kanoa, which is a new startup. We're building a technology platform for sustainable design and construction, specifically focused on modular design and construction, and specifically focused on adaptive reuse and retrofit. And so how that relates to work is, as we've, I think, all seen really during the last year, this conversation around the future of work that has been drastically accelerated by COVID has and is creating a situation where we work and how we work is sort of being changed drastically. What we have identified is that a lot of traditional building archetypes, like the CBD office tower or the suburban office park, are going to be and are being challenged significantly, and their offerings are changing. So will 100-story towers in a downtown New York City be as easy to fill as they used to be? Or will they need to be redesigned and rethought in some way, shape, or form? What will happen to all of the retail space around these towers? What will happen to all of the transit around these towers? What will happen to all of the surrounding areas? And so when the conversation of future work comes in, it is all encompassing. It has to do with traffic, it has to do with transport, it has to do with our cities, it has to do with the way in which we designed them in the 20th century. So Kanoa's focus is to drastically lower what we call the transaction costs of turning one thing, one building, one space from one thing to another. Even if it's still an office space, it'll be for fundamentally sort of different patterns of use, if you will. And so we're strictly focused on these transactions and these internal constructions, these designs, to adaptively reuse these spaces for where we need to go now.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you into this?
I was trained as an architect, but I think I've spent most of my career trying to build companies that use spatial design from urban all the way down to building design, as part of its core know-how and value proposition. But really, we were trying to sort of apply that knowledge in different ways. And so prior to starting Kanoa, I was the head of design and construction for WeWork. I came to that position through their acquisition of my previous company, which was a company called Case. That company was a design and technology consulting firm. It was basically an agency model where we built technology, bespoke technology for architects, for builders, and also for what we call owners or occupiers. And prior to that, when I last practiced at Shop Architects here in New York City.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you participating in the competition. What are you hoping to see emerge?
What is most interesting about this moment, this year, 2021, is that the press, social media, and magazines and blogs have been awash with sort of predictions about what's going to happen with the office, what's going to happen with all of these sort of more traditional archetypes. There's a fair amount of clickbait that is sort of happening out there. But beneath that, there are trends that are beginning to solidify and I think will be easier to see over the next few years. What I would be excited to see is I think some really sort of critical looks at these things. We're beginning to see it with lots of investment into IAQ and lots of sort of education around that. And what is the sort of level of responsibility that's going to come around to companies and to workplaces around things of that nature. The second thing, which is really, really interesting, is when companies go full remote or partial remote or hybrid or whatever any of the sort of models are that come about, there's a lot of talk about what responsibility companies have around workplaces when they don't control those workplaces any longer. Part of what I'm excited to see in these competitions is to begin to rethink a little bit how how this sort of redefinition of workplace is more portable, less static, less sort of a place and a destination, and more something that it can be taken from one place to another. These two trends are things that are just fascinating, and so the blending of the technologies that we're seeing pop up together with what we would call the physical world, and how these two things are now finally, I think, working together more cohesively than they used to. I think should make for a really interesting competition and really sort of interesting set of ideas in terms of how we will be working over the next 10 years.
I'm fascinated. What you do kind of covers a very broad spectrum of issues. And within that, it's like, what do you want to see change?
I think at the core, we have a responsibility to make buildings better. We have a responsibility to make environments better. Just sort of rearranging what we have, or kind of calling something we already had before something different or by a new name is just not going to cut it. And so we speak a lot about this idea of productizing architecture, and not because of any other reason other than the fact that what we have seen, and we definitely saw through the rise of companies like WeWork and others, is that people are expecting a lot more of their spaces, a lot more, significantly more. And they will begin to express that in ways that I think landlords and even companies aren't really ready to respond to. When somebody walks up to you and says, the level of the carbon dioxide levels in my corner of the office are unacceptable, what are you going to do about it? Companies don't know how to respond to this. When somebody says, was all of this upholstery that is all over this conference room sourced from reputable places? And they will not be able to answer those questions. And so we do live in a world where we know more about our clothing, about our coffee, about all of these consumer products. We know a lot more about them than the spaces where we spend all day long in. We have no idea what's behind these walls. We have no idea what made them, who made them, were they treated fairly. We have no idea about any of those kinds of things. I do think that there is a changing expectation on the consumer side of space, on the consumer side of real estate, that the industry is sort of ill-equipped to be able to respond to. And so what I'm hoping to see is a whole new crop of brands and designers and product manufacturers and product companies that speak to this generation and speak to these needs and say, no, you're right. We have to do these things. We have to create these spaces. We have to, and it has to be human-centered. It has to be thought about with the end user in mind. And a lot of this, I think we'll see the emergence of these very human-centered operating companies that effectively create a layer between the occupier and the property company and the landlord. And that layer is effectively a white glove layer of services, as we see in the hospitality world, that cares for the occupier in a way that a landlord is just really, really ill-equipped to do. And those companies, those folks really do care about design, and those folks really do care about experience. And we're going to begin to have architects begin to think about a product and not just design. A product in the sense that a product is all-encompassing. It considers a business design and services design and an end user, and it takes feedback and it improves over time. And it's not just about opinion, but it has to do with validated information. So I do think that the world is going to force us to get a lot smarter and to get a lot better about the work that we're doing.
Oh, fascinating. I mean, that's such a radically different way that everyone has to think about it. It's going to be pretty interesting. Let me ask you, for the individuals and teams who are considering submitting something for the competition, what kinds of things are you going to be looking at, and what sort of recommendations do you have about how they should approach it?
I've always been a fan in these types of things of big ideas simply explained. I just turned 40 this year, and I'm at a point where I'm very much still waiting for the 21st century to start in a way, and I do think that this global pandemic has wrapped the world in a single event into a kind of before and after, and I'm excited. More than anything, I think to encourage these young designers to show us older folk how what we're not seeing, what is the world that they see, because whatever we design today will be for them. It won't be for us, right? Like these are the spaces that will be mostly utilized by the new workforce, and so. So for me, it's about not trying to replicate what we already had, but really about thinking about how things should be and will be different. That's my main recommendation. Beyond that, tactically speaking, go nuts. I enjoy variety and diversity of sort of presentation and all that stuff. So
no, that's great. I really like the way that you've framed that and the thinking that goes into that and that very sort of futuristic look. Frederico, thanks again. I'm really excited to have you participating in this competition. I think you're going to bring a very unique perspective and set of insights for that. So I'll look forward to working with you on the competition.
Sounds great. Well, thank you. Appreciate being here.